Just a couple reminders, at 4:15 after our next speaker, we'll be going back into the same working groups that we were with this morning so we can continue that discussion, build on those discussions, and think about the kinds of models that have been presented to us this afternoon to try and think about how we can integrate those into our work or develop similar or different ones. Also wanted to remind everybody to make sure they clean up after themselves when they leave this room. But remember also that you're going to be coming back to this room for the closing plenary. You don't want to miss it tonight, as well as the performance by Aya de Leon, so make sure that you plan for that. Now, our last but certainly not least, is everybody here? Everybody's here? Okay, cool. And I've introduced them before, and they really actually need not a whole lot of introduction. Sista II Sista from Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you, y'all. I'm gonna try to do the opening part briefly, abbreviated version of our Her Story. And basically, in fall of '95, there was a gathering that sparked a conversation by women of color talking about the need for a space where the main focus could be young women of color, and that there wasn't a space, that there was only spaces where if it was women talking, it would be mostly dominated by older women, and if it was a space about organizing, then there really wasn't a space to hear the voices of women, and in particular young women of working class. So from there, in spring of '96, we started developing the plan for our first Freedom School and how to create a space in which there could be a highlight or a space just safe for young women of color. And then summer '96 was the first time that we had our Freedom School. Up until then, our coordination wasn't very intentional per se. It was more like there was a coordinating body, and then there were just a lot of volunteers who did the work necessary. And in '97, we started talking about deliberately building an organization and the need to really base it on our roots and looking at different models that weren't as obvious to us, like a collective model where there was equal say and equal decision making. And then came the decision to have a 501c3, and then so all of a sudden our budget went from having 2 years of Freedom School running pretty much all volunteer, the budget somewhere around $2,500 just for program expenses that we raised ourselves or donated, and then all of a sudden the first year going to like a $200,000 budget, and then that's 98, 99 going up to like 300, and then after that us saying, okay, we gotta cap it, and ever since it's been a struggle to cap it at like 330 or whatever the hell we're at now. But and also I should say that of course we were looking at it, well, not of course, but we were looking at it in terms of personal as political, and really needing to find a space for us to become whole. And so the political education / holistic development piece was what we envisioned first with the Freedom Schools. And then as time surpassed, well, actually I'm gonna pass on to Adwa to define the collective a little bit better.
So I'm just going to talk real quick a little bit more about what our collective structure is like, and we were trying, and part of it is like, you know, one of the things that we came to, like what Vera was saying, is that the process was as much the work as anything else, you know. So we really wanted to develop as we got into this 501c3 thing, but we're clear that we didn't want that, to dictate the kind of structure that we were going to have, and we felt like this was the political work that we were committed to, was creating a structure and a process that was reflective of the kind of political change and political vision that we had as a group. So what that ended up looking like for us is a flower. We have if you can imagine, like, you know, a flower has petals, and then the different petals are the different areas of work. And one of the things that it was clear to us is that it was important that we kind of make sure that people were rotating. But we went, and it's gone through like many different evolutions, this flower structure. And I mean, I know from the very beginning, like after the first like couple summers of the Freedom School, there was a coordinating body, and then there were the other folks in the petals, and then that in itself started creating a very weird hierarchy of like the central people that had all these other meetings, and then the other bigger, and then the larger body of folks that were supporting the work. And, so then that started to feel really weird, and there were tensions that were coming up around that. So then we decided to burst that little central coordinating committee and to just have a general collective. One of the struggles that we face right now is after we started getting foundation funding, that the organization all of a sudden started to feel like it was being more staff-driven. That's still a struggle that we're really in now. And part of the way that we try to counter that is the collective is currently 14 women of color, right, that have been involved for some folks have been around for, several years, some folks have been around for a couple years, so, and then around half of those folks are also staff people of the organization, and
a little bit less.
A little bit less, and the other folks are volunteer collective members. And one of the things, so there's been a couple of things that we've tried to do to make sure that there's a balance between staff-driven leadership versus volunteer, or we don't like that term, but non-staff member leadership. And one of those things is that all, so for example, if you're in a collective, there's some required time that you have to give. There's, a 3-hour monthly collective meeting. There's a 3-hour monthly cipher, sister cipher, which is the time that we have to build around vision and around issues that, like you don't usually have time to reflect on or grow on with each other. And that time that we all give as collective members is volunteer for everybody, regardless of whether you're staff or not. And that was really important because it's, to make sure that there wasn't this, and that, so even if you have a job as a sister, you understand that it is a larger commitment in terms of the time that you need to give to the work outside of your staff role. Another thing was around the salary structure that, that everyone had, there's a flat salary irrelevant to, how long you've been around and what your educational background. But we understand that even that isn't equitable, right? And that's another point of contradiction and struggle because people come from different class backgrounds within the collective, right? And so even though, we're all getting paid the same, but we don't all have the same financial responsibilities to our families and who, we're supporting. So just because we're all getting paid the same doesn't mean it's equitable. And that's still something that we're in struggle with, that we haven't fully, that we're still kind of in that question. In addition to the pedals, we have what we call work team. Okay, and besides it's so complicated. Okay. This is going to be 10 minutes, so I have to wrap it up. Okay, so then... So there's the collective. In the collective, you have kind of like older folks and like we're older folks. Morgan's still younger, but and then we have young women that have been around for a while, that have participated in the Freedom School for a while, that are we're what we call squad members, or the young women leadership in the organization. And when they feel like they're ready, or if they feel like they want to, they're encouraged to move into the collective. So currently, we have 4 folks that are past squad members that have moved into the collective, and then we have other young women that are squad members, and they're the young women leadership of the organization that are separate from the collective. And then we have work teams that are kind of like the work of the pedals, that are kind of the areas of work where the vision is created, but then what that looks like concretely is in the work teams, and that's made up of both collective members and squad members.
And other volunteers.
And other outside members that are not necessarily in the collective or staff or squad. So and then we do have a board, because we had to have a board for the whole 501c3 thing, and it is something, it is actually useful to have, folks that are supporting and helping you to think through stuff that maybe have had more experience doing the work, or maybe are coming from different perspectives or whatever. But what was important for us is that they're an advisory board. They don't have any decision-making power, and even though that means fiscally that they're legally responsible, right? But they understand that they are that on paper, but that they, oh my God, but that they don't have decision-making power.
Okay. We have like 5 minutes, so I'm gonna rush through it. Basically, what has happened is that when about 2 years ago, all of a sudden we found a police van parked outside. It wasn't all of a sudden, it actually happened at the same time of a community meeting that we were having. And it was the first community meeting where we were really talking about creating some type of community alternative to the police. And at that first meeting was when we had a policeman just located outside, all of a sudden tapped onto the phone line that goes into our office. And that really made us really start talking more and more about how to be, like, what does it really mean to be self-sufficient, and what are the effects that come with that, in particular in terms of organizing work, right? So we were developing this idea of Sisters Liberated Ground, which is a space in which no violence against women, in particular young women, would be tolerated. And we knew that because prior we had like actions and we had the target as the police, we had decided that the target was within us. We needed to fight the culture of violence that was within our own community. And the breakdown of SLG. Okay, so then breakdown of SLG is basically that now, first we are doing some internal work within our own members, trying to create sister circles, which is a space in which young women hold one another accountable and talk about their relationships, talk about their ideas, talk about their interactions, both in the street, with family, and with just harassers or friends and stuff. I'm sorry, I'm getting all nervous. And then we also do workshops in which we're combating the yo lo paso. I'm sorry. I'm getting too nervous.
Why? Breathe. Okay, yeah, so time. So, I mean, it's basically a community-based alternative to the police that we're building very slowly on the ground.
Yeah, that we know that it's going to take a while and that we're still in the framework for. And so we tried to go through two alternatives of some of the things that we had thought about, the collective and SLG, and now we're going to go towards why it was important to look at grassroots fundraising as an alternative, because obviously working within our community is not considered organizing because it doesn't have a target, like tangible.
So, as all this hard work is going on, we're realizing our reliance on foundations, right? Almost 100% of our funding is coming from foundations, but we're recognizing how grassroots fundraising has to become important, especially with surveillance. So she's going to talk about the bottom lines we've identified, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about how we took on grassroots fundraising.
Okay, so this past fall, we've done our strategic planning for the next 3 years, and it was a really intense process, and within it, we identified that we're super dependent on foundation money. So one, how do we set up this plan where it's each year we become less dependent on it, but also within that, checking ourselves on our foundation dependency, and creating these guidelines and personal reminders of the things that we will not do to get funding. Funders are ready to call the folks that we work with and the young women that we work with, folks that are disadvantaged, they're underprivileged, and folks that are in need of something. And we refuse to consider or even look at the young women that we work with in this light. So, and then on top of that, we do no corporate funding, no government funding, no federal funding. So, it's just our bottom lines was just so that it was unsaid, years prior to this, but now just really knowing okay, this is our limit. And, now it's checking foundations on social responsible funding and what they're doing, really trying to check foundations on what they're doing and where they're getting their money from. So now we're gonna just go to grassroots fundraising.
So, in doing the strategic planning process, we actually decided to map out how grassroots fundraising was going to become our main area, 2 minutes, of fundraising. And what we did was we prioritized individual donors, we prioritized our Big Mouth workshops, and we prioritized our products. So with individual donors, we had a twofold strategy. We want to go into our community, identify our support base there, right? We want to educate them on why it's important to, donate on an ongoing basis, as opposed to, okay, I got $1 in my pocket, here you go, because it's important to establish the relationship, so they see it as, okay, I'm paying my water bill and I'm also paying the Sista II Sista because I value that work, this is valuable and therefore we need to do this monthly, daily, whatever it is, okay? So we really are prioritizing the individual, not just for financial, but also this is our political base as well, the one doesn't operate without the other, right? So that's why we're really focusing on individual donors. And it's hard work because we weren't raised to identify savings as being important, or valuing the fact that organizations that do work in our communities are important, so we have to educate ourselves and then also educate those people who are who really want to support us, right? Next is our Big Mouth project, in which are workshops where we, go out and train other people and help them to understand the oppressions, the isms, help them understand, ageism, help them understand violence against young women, take the time that our organizations, our other grassroots allies don't have the time to educate other folks. So we come in and try to help them reinforce these issues, that we all understand, but we may not have the time to build that. So Sista II Sista identifies, that we would do this work every day, right? So we decided, okay, let's bring this information to our allies, let's bring this information to universities, let's bring this information to people who need to know that, these oppressions exist and you need to understand them and recognize them and how you participate in them. Okay. So, products, our t-shirts.
www.sistatosista.org.
Okay, we'll close it.
Thank you to all the organizations who inspired us so much this afternoon. Let's give them all a big hand.